First, I'd like to thank the organisers of Laval Virtual for inviting me. I'd especially like to thank Thierry Olivier, who engineered the connection, and I'd like to thank Maurice for helping me make my presentation so much easier. We are colleagues. You'll see we work in a very parallel space, and there's no doubt that I also share, and I think many other artists of our generation also share, this sense that somehow or other we are dealing with the big questions, and each of us come toward define what these questions are and come about offering tentative solutions in different ways. Now I've prepared my presentation in the format of sort of meditation around the topic of future cinema, and I think Maurice mentioned to you that this was also an exhibition that I curated some time ago at the ZKM, but I also still think it's a very pertinent theme. One is talking about, to some extent, about optical systems and perceptual experiences, and about a history of these phenomena. And especially when one's talking about the cinema, one looks back to a period when the cinema was being, you could say, invented. And one can be impressed by this enormous range of devices and experiments that were going on at that time. All these bizarre machines that were being developed. And to some extent I feel that we are also now in a time of this kind of experimentation. Developing new apparatus and new strategies of representation. Now, I'm going to frame my presentation. It's largely a presentation of works, and I will frame it in terms of certain themes, certain central themes. Many of these themes, again, echo the presentation that Maurice just made. So, interactivity undoubtedly is one of the core components of what constitutes the new media. And in this presentation I'll sort of go back and forth between earlier work of mine and more recent work, let's say analog and digital work, but I want to just show you a certain pattern of obsessions, and for instance in this case interactivity, and different strategies for actually achieving the result. The result is, in this case, the viewer, the art consumer becoming an active player, an active participant in the artwork. And here, early experiment with a projection screen. And as you can see, this projection screen on the right is a transparent screen filled with white balloons. And each balloon has a tube attached to it, and this tube is going into the audience. And so the audience by blowing in the tube, are inflating or deflating those white balloons. So it's actually the audience that are controlling the shape of the surface on which the projected image appears. Now I'm going to jump forward to a work, The Legible City, where the viewer is able to bicycle in cities of text. These cities are based on the ground plans of real cities, Manhattan, Amsterdam, and then later Karlsruhe. The houses, the buildings, are replaced by letters, and the letters together form words, and these words form sentences. So that as you are bicycling through these virtual cities, you are actually reading the city, reading the text. You actually see on this little LCD monitor in front of you, you see the ground plans of the actual city, and you see where you are located in that city. And the word sentences together constitute stories, basically narrative. So it's transforming the city architecture into a narrative space that you read as you bicycle around its streets. In this work, the interaction is caused by the system reading the lines on your hand, and then it takes those lines as a kind of mark, a sort of unique mark of your identity, and it puts those lines into the image space. And you can see other lines which are the history of other people's hand lines. So in a way you connect your hand lines to a history or memory of other people's participation, and you join that sort of a web of interactivity. And in the background you see a tapestry of let's say a sort of cellular tapestry of video clips, which are also refer to different kinds of networks, to social networks, traffic networks, electronic networks, biological networks, and this is a database of videos which is let's say randomly sampled every time somebody puts their new imprint into the system. Now another important thematic is immersion. And again, I'll jump back to a very early experiment with immersion. This was at the Experimental Film Festival in Knokke in Belgium. And here the projection screen is not on the wall, but the projection screen is on the floor. It's an inflatable structure. Film and is projected onto that screen, that soft screen on the floor. And both performers and then audience could jump into the screen. So the viewer is actually jumping into the projection screen, and of course modulating the shape of the image, and at the same time being physically co-present in the image. Now this, let's say, conjunction of physical presence of the viewer as an immersed presence in the image is also articulated in this work, Heaven's Gate. There's projection on the ceiling, and the floor is a mirror. So the visitor, when they look down in the mirror, they see their own reflection, and they see the reflection of the video image. So their own, let's say, the image of their own body is integrated into the space of representation. The actual narrative of this work is a very simple, you could say, oscillation between the Baroque gaze up to the heavens, so paintings of Baroque ceiling paintings of heavenly spaces, and satellite pictures looking down onto the planet Earth. And the piece just oscillates between the Baroque gaze up and the contemporary view from satellite view down. And again, in the installation, you are in a situation where you are sort of suspended between an image that's above you and an image that's below you. And these, let's say, digital trompe-l'oeil-like transitions basically move you between these two axes. And this is another work that extends, in a way, the paradigm. In this work, one is looking simply at images of various architectures, various ceilings. In fact, this work was commissioned for Lille, Cultural Capital of Europe, and the pictures we're seeing are fisheye images taken at different locations in Lille of different buildings, but all kinds of buildings, municipal buildings, factory buildings, private houses, shops. Now, this is a cave work. Again, the cave actually offers, as a technology, one of the strongest, let's say, means of engaging immersion. And I think, again, as Maurice clearly showed with his cave work, World Skin, one of the interesting challenges also is to create a interface between the viewer and the cave space of representation. And in this case, this involved building a wooden puppet, a mannequin, with sensors in all its joints, so that when you entered the cave space, you could manipulate, play, dance with the puppet, and those interactions with the puppet would modulate the behavior of the visual space. And handling the puppet was a process of discovering that space. Closing the puppet's eyes would make the room go dark, and then opening the puppet's eyes would take you into another visual space. And you can see here that manipulation of the head, of the hands, have very specific effects. In general, one could say that the puppet is at the center of this virtual universe, and manipulation of the puppet, rotating its position in space, moving its head, would change its and your point of view in that space. And certain positions of the puppet would trigger very specific events, like this sort of whirlpool of signs, which would trigger just when the puppet was upside down. Another important, let's say, component of this field of research is the panoramic gaze. Again, it has very strong, it's very much anchored in a history of representation, panoramic painting, and also in a history of media. This is the Panorama Mestdag in The Hague, a very, very beautiful painting at the beginning of the century, looking out over the seaside at Scheveningen. And of course, you have that the cinema in its as it has an enormous appetite for extension in space. Cinerama being one of its high points in terms of engaging the audience's sense of immersion. And I'll just show you this as a sort of slight detour. Work I did with Genesis for the tour Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. A first attempt to create a continuous panoramic narrative done just with slide projection. At that time it was the only technology that was there allowing this kind of large-scale presentation. Now, then moving towards 360-degree panoramic visualization spaces, projected environments, and also, again, looking for ways in which narrative can be distributed in a panoramic space. Again, you'll see, I think, strong parallels with Maurice's work, The Retinal Memory. It's everything to do with somehow or other, in a way, the hyper-realism or the realism of the real world, where we are continuously inhabiting spaces which are just densely filled with narrative, with multiple narrative occurrences. And as people who exist in this space and move through this space, we are continuously assembling our own personal narrative by choosing where we focus our gaze, where we focus our attention. Just simply another illustration of, let's say, an immersive expression of new media. This is simply taking, this is a work of Bernd Lintermann at the ZKM, taking Google Maps and remapping Google Maps as a 360-degree immersive experience. Which also includes some social media aspects, because this work accesses panoramic photographs which are on the web. So again, this leads to another very important paradigm, and that is that the viewer is no longer a passive spectator, but the viewer in this world becomes both the camera person, becomes also director of what is to some of what is happening, and editor. In this particular work, the projector is mounted on a pan and tilt device, and there is a sensor on the viewer's head which basically tracks their point of view, and that moves the window of view. So as you move around, you're moving the projector and moving that viewing window in the space. And in this case, the space is a complete inflatable dome. So information is distributed throughout this spherical space. Now, this is a work of a French artist in residence at ZKM, who used this system to make a work, and you'll see example of this work now. Again, you're moving a window, and you're moving it in a narrative space. Again, narrative content is distributed all over the dome, and you are basically moving from one topic to another. And this is the actual database. It's a 4K by 4K fisheye movie. So all the content is embedded in this movie, and you're basically moving a window around inside this movie. Also then interesting is the way in which one hybridizes a linear movie, because the movie is a 6-minute long linear work, but the interactive component is let's say the control of the camera window and the editing, which is given over to the viewer. Now, these are other experiments in creating panoramic visualization spaces. This was one particular paradigm where you have a 360-degree screen. You have a platform in the middle which is motorized, so that you are able to rotate your point of view around. This is the one work called Place Humpy. The virtual world is constituted by cylinders, virtual cylinders. These were photographed using a stereo panoramic photo camera, which enabled us to create stereo pairs of images. So that one basically rotates one's point of view and also can move forwards and backwards in the virtual world. So you're exploring a space populated by cylindrical images. You can enter these cylinders. It's a passive stereo projection system. By grace of projection design. You have an LCD screen in front of you which you can rotate, and you see buttons which allow you to move forwards and backwards. Again, moving around in this virtual space of cylinders, entering, being able to enter a cylinder. And in some panoramas there is also some animation events. We worked with an animation company in Bangalore and created a number of representations of Hindu gods, and these were then animated and embedded in the photographic space. I have to apologize because I haven't connected my audio, so this time around all of these works, or most of the works that I've shown you, are fairly audio rich as well. And then another, let's say, variation of this 360-degree implementation, which involves complete projection in the full 360 degrees. Now, this is a work done with the Wooster Group in New York, a very famous theater company. We built a panoramic video camera. You can see this ring of 12 cameras. These are each 2 megapixel video cameras, so we have a total resolution of 24 megapixels for the whole video. And you can see the set where the cameras are located on a table, and actors are sort of performing a piece around. Now, this is the actual panoramic movie that was shot. It's a half-hour performance. There's no editing. It's just performing in front of the cameras for half an hour. And the way the piece is presented is in a 360-degree screen, and there is one viewer on a chair in the middle of the cylinder, and that person controls the movement of a window of sharpness, so that most of the image is out of focus, a kind of metaphor for or embodiment of the notion of peripheral vision. And the area, that part where you are looking straight ahead, where that person on the chair controls a certain window of view, that's the area which is in focus. And of course the audio is being modulated accordingly, so you are hearing, mostly what you are hearing is what's in front of you, and the sound of what's going on with the other actors around you is sort of muted down. So again, it's a 360 space of distributed narrative, and as a viewer you can choose where you move in this narrative and how you edit these narrative components together. Okay, now a little intermission while I just move to another part of this presentation. Another thematic which I'd like to introduce in terms of this, let's say, space of future cinema is the notion of recombinatory aesthetics. Now, this also has been explored by many people in many ways, famously by Raymond Queneau in his 100 million poems, simply a book of poems where every line can be turned independently, leading to all these possible combinations. But also remarkable work of William Burroughs. It's one of the very earliest examples of video cut-up, where he's actually just assembling bits and pieces of video in a sort of in a video cut-up. So in our 360-degree visualization space, we have another, way of approaching this this possibility of a recombinatory aesthetics. In this work, over 30,000 video clips are in a database. They can be presented on this 360-degree projection screen. Up to 500 videos can be presented simultaneously, but typically we are showing around 250 videos. They are also, it's a 3D experience. Even though the videos themselves are 2D, they are distributed in a 3D space. So this is the virtual space around the cylinder where all these videos are played out. And in this work, basically, you can click on any video. It will look at the metadata associated with that video, and then look for other video clips which it thinks are similar, and assemble those video clips around the one you've chosen. But at the same time, behind you, it will show the opposite. So it will show both, you could say, the synonyms and antonyms, both those things which match which most closely match what you asked for, and those things which are most, let's say, opposite to what you asked for. And then once you have this spectrum of images on the screen, you can then drag and drop these images and assemble them into sequences. All the video data is from broadcast television, so it's just taking, you could say, TV trash and recycling that trash as sort of Lego blocks, as sort of, you could say, narrative Lego blocks, which the viewer can then reassemble into some kind of emergent narrative experience. Now again, this is another work of Jean-Michel Bruyère, using this particular environment, and also picking up on that notion of a space of, let's say, a density of video data. But in this case, the video data is constituted by his own personal archive of video creation. And you will see that he's embodied this in a completely different atmosphere. And again, you see all kinds of interesting aesthetic conjunctions. This certainly will remind you of Maurice's tunneling experiments. So this is a kind of roller coaster ride through some kind of organism, where video clips are textured to the surface of this shape. In terms of coding, there are a number of sort of generative aspects to this work, because it has a number of different, let's say, algorithmic parameters, so that choice of videos, speed of movement, shape of the environment is continuously being, you could say, almost randomly modulated. So interesting thing about this work is that it is always changing. You will never see the same, you'll never have exactly the same image twice. Now, of course, our future cinema is very much to do with addressing the senses. I'll show you just a couple of examples of experiments in this direction. This is a work of Tomasz Walitsky, which I cooperated on. It uses a motion platform. It's an extremely simple piece. It's just interactively driving your point of view through an infinite forest, a forest which extends in all directions, up, down, left, right. You can never leave this forest, whichever direction you go. And you are on a motion platform so that you are kinesthetically engaged in this experience of actually floating through this infinite forest. Another, of course, core theme, and one which I think a lot of you are very familiar with, is the notion of augmentation of the real, which also includes the augmentation of the virtual, the whole interplay of the real and the virtual, and the, let's say, the paradoxical or ambiguous relationship between the two. On the left, I show you an earlier work of mine in that time of working with inflatables and slide projection, cloud of day, sky at night. And on the right, of course, we see this seminal moment when Ivan Sutherland invented the head-mounted display. I'll just briefly show you this work, Viewpoint. It was shown in Paris for the Biennale in 1975, and it is an optical viewing system that attempts indeed to create the conjunction of real and virtual reality, but albeit no video projectors, no computers, not much technology around in 1975. So this is using slide projection, just let's say automated slide projection. But what's happening here is that I think I have to walk over to actually put it on the draw it. That rectangle is a projection screen, and when you look through this optical device, you are looking at this projection screen and you see images projected on that screen. So that image of myself with the pickaxe is the slide projected image. And as you can see, the slide incorporates the image of the window and the image of the room. So from the point of view of the viewer, there is a continuity, a spatial continuity between the real space and the virtual space being basically a reproduction or a photography of the real space, but at a different time. And actually what you would watch if you saw this piece is me walking towards the window with this pickaxe and breaking the window. Now these people are real visitors to the museum, and actually they can see nothing. They don't see anything on the screen. For them, the screen is blank. It's only through the optical system that you see the conjunction of the real world, real people moving around in the real space, and the projected imagery. And this is done by grace of technology invented, I believe, during the Second World War, or by the film industry, basically as a way of it's called using retroreflective projection material. Now, of course, once computers come on the scene, there are other ways of doing this. And this, again, uses an optical system with a half mirror where you can rotate the monitor and tilt the monitor and look out into a real space and see virtual objects overlaid in the real space as sort of ghosts. And then this is another incarnation of this strategy, a work done for La Villette in 1987, which uses a kind of a periscope which you can rotate. So it's again a work that deals with panoramic imagery, and you can discover virtual images floating in the real museum space. Again, other people walking around in the space do not see this. You only experience this looking through the optical system. The work is called Inventer la Terre because the images which are being projected are, you could say, archaic scientific images. So this device is a kind of a memory, a sort of memory machine or archive of ghosts of, let's say, previous sciences, which have now been, of course, replaced by our contemporary scientific worldview. So this is actually you could say the panoramic space where you choose certain topics, and you can by rotating the periscope you can visit these different locations. And now again, playing with this paradoxical relationship of real and virtual, an early experiment with augmented reality, a monitor with a tracking device, and you could look back at this pedestal and discover, standing on the pedestal, a golden calf. And of course, by moving the monitor around in space, you could view that golden calf from different points of view. And if you looked closely, you could also see that the skin of the golden calf, which was was very reflective, was also mirroring the real room in which you were in. So this virtual golden calf, which was not there and was there on the screen, was actually reflecting the actual space which you were in. Of course, this was done by taking photographs of the real space beforehand and using these as reflection maps on the skin of the golden calf. Now this same, paradigm was then adapted for this work, the panoramic navigator. Again, video camera at the top, looking around in the real space, and then adding and being able to touch on areas in the real space and get information about that space. So this was like a guiding system for people who entered the building. They could look around in the space, identify certain areas that looked interesting. They could also rotate the ground plan of the building, go to different floors at the same viewing angle. And I think we also had a camera up on the roof, so you could also, from the ground floor, rotate your point of view from the roof of the building. Now this is a very recent incarnation of the same principle, very practically applied. A screen with a camera behind it, looking around. The museum is just full of objects, full of these creatures. You can touch on any one of them as you move the device around or tilt it, and then you get information about that particular creature. And this device also allows you to download onto your iPhone and keep a record of your visit. Which leads, of course, to the topic of mixed reality. I'll show you one experiment. At Hampi, there are lots of monkeys, and there is also Hampi is also considered in the Ramayana to be the kingdom of the apes, the kingdom of Hanuman, the monkey god. So we did an experiment where we actually, you saw earlier an example of that dancer, Shiva, dancing in the photographic environment. Here we have these, let's say, slightly mythological monkeys, but these are real-time creatures. We have a tracking system in the area where we can track people's movement in the space, so we can understand where they are. The red one is a real person, and the blue one is a virtual person that's following that person around. This is just to demonstrate the functionality of the system. So as a result of that, we first motion captured an actor to create certain, let's say, monkey behaviors. And And then we have a group of monkeys who have certain, behavioral characteristics. And that's a real person moving around in the space. And you can see as that person gets close to those monkeys, they become aware of that person's presence and react accordingly. So there are certain behaviors of curiosity, of anxiety, of nervousness, of panic, which are triggered by simply the sensing of the proximity of a viewer to those characters. And this is another situation where you have a virtual tourist and a real visitor approaches the tourist. The tourist recognizes that somebody is nearby, then talks to that person and says, "Would you like to be in my movie?" Takes their virtual camera, does a recording of the real person who's standing in front of them, and then shows that person the movie that was just made by this virtual character of them actually watching them. So again, this conjunction of real and virtual spaces. Now this is a machine. It's the machine itself is we call it reactor. It's a 6-sided back projection environment. And it's a stereoscopic projection system, and it allows you to create, you could say, a virtual space which the viewer can walk around and look into from 6 different points of view. Now, one work that we created for this is based on a text of Samuel Beckett called The Lost Ones, and he describes a community of people that are incarcerated in an enclosed space. Now, in this particular work, you have a community of virtual humans, and you view them by moving a torch and moving a virtual torch light inside that space. And again, 6 people can view this community from 6 different points of view, and there are 6 torch beams which they are manipulating to view them. Those characters, again, are based on the Beckett text, so their appearance and their behavior follows the narrative of that text. So one is moving the torch. There are sensors which are measuring its angle of view. Now, another aspect is that you can actually point the torch directly in front of you, and you will actually see the other person. You will illuminate the other person who is on the other side of the virtual space. So you not only can view the virtual characters, but you can actually view the real person who's on the other side of the screen. And if somebody later wants to ask me how it's done, I'm happy to explain. Again, being able to point the torch straight through. And this is just, actually it's a mapping of the narrative space. It shows the logic of the different behavior possibilities for the different characters and how they interact with each other. And once that's put in place, then a game engine basically keeps the whole thing playing and being continuously improvised. It's a somewhat dystopian work. You could say the human race at the end of time. Now, this is just a virtual, it just basically gives you a kind of a representation of how the piece is actually constructed. Now, this is the last work, the last sequence of pieces I want to show you, and it just focuses on a certain area of research and artistic activity, which I and colleagues are very closely involved with at the moment in the field of digital humanities and digital cultural heritage. Now I've got 5 minutes left, but it'll take me about 10 minutes, okay? So I'll just prepare everybody for this time frame. We have a lab in Hong Kong called the Applied Laboratory for Interactive Visualization and Embodiment, where a lot of these machineries are set up and where a lot of this research and experimentation is taking place. And these are the apparatuses that we're working with: the 360-degree projection systems, dome projection, hemispherical projection, half cave projection, and this six-sided reactor. Now here's a work in relation to archaeological work being done on tombs in mainland China. So tombs are continuously being discovered. They're being laser scanned, photographed, and we are taking this laser scan data and photography and creating, let's say, virtual reconstruction of this space inside a 360-degree 3D projection environment, and also a situation where you can click on certain painterly details and zoom in and look at them close up. Now, more recently, a much bigger, more ambitious work is done together with the Dunhuang Academy in China. There is an extraordinary site there, the Mogao Grottos, hundreds of caves, painted over a period of 1400 years. Every cave absolutely exceptionally beautifully painted, under enormous threat of let's say environmental damage, and so big issues to do with long-term sustainability. So our system basically offers people the opportunity to select different caves which they would like to visit virtually in this kind of cave browser environment. Each one of these pictures represents one or other possible cave, but currently we're only working with a data set from one cave, so we only have a prototype demonstration which just works with one particular cave, Cave 220, this one. This is the cave. This is the painting on the north wall. And so with this data, of course, in a virtual space, you can do this incredibly powerful zooming on detail. Much more, I mean, if you were actually visiting the cave, this gives you more power of visualization, of viewing, than you have in the real cave. And also experiments, obviously, with recoloring, because of course a lot of these paintings have been exposed to wear and tear over time, so recoloring, and also to enhance, let's say, the didactic experience for a general public, adding certain animated component animations to the image. A very important iconographic feature are these Buddhas and their canopies. These have been, again, repainted, again under the supervision of academics from the Dunhuang Academy. And here we see the repainted images popping out of the painting. And again, using the magnifying glass to be able to view this. In the painting there are musical instruments, being able to bring up the musical instruments as 3D objects and also listen to them. There is a soundtrack attached to this where you hear and we also worked with dancers from the Beijing Dance Academy to recreate one of the dances that are in the painting using a 3D rig. Another project involves a very famous Buddhist canon in Korea, the Tripitaka Koreana. Again, hundreds of wood blocks. There is a quite famous Korean scholar, Buddhist scholar, Professor Lou Lancaster, who has developed a kind of digital humanity strategy of interrogating these texts by converting all the characters into blue dots, and then looking at these arrays of dots and then identifying certain characters and giving them colors and then looking for patterns in this array of dots. Now currently his only, let's say, viewing environment for this is a monitor screen, and we are actually experimenting with taking this massive, let's say, visual database and putting it into a 360-degree immersive environment, so that basically you can interrogate these what were once wood blocks inside this cylindrical space. We're also working with the Europeana, and this is just a sketch for a current project. Looking at using an iPad as an interface to, again, interrogating large cultural data sets. And also looking at, especially in a 360-degree environment, looking at strategies for multi-user engagement. This is a work done recently in Turkey, and I'm just going to show you quickly some experiments in panoramic video recording as another very powerful tool in terms of cultural heritage documentation.